Okay, so it's now 7:34 p.m. I promised you guys 2 hours, so I'm going to go to at least 9:34 p.m. But if you've ever done a class with me, you know that I can't stop talking. You also know that with post-processing, there's a fair bit to get through. So the chances are, even with my coughing, we're probably going to go a little bit longer than the 2 hours tonight, just because I want to make sure that we get through a fair bit of stuff. Obviously, with 2 or 2 and a bit hours, we're not going to get through everything in post-processing. Post-processing is a really big thing. It's not something you can master in 2 hours, but it's something we can definitely get better at, and something we can be doing, at least, enough good stuff that our images are a lot better straight away. So I'm going to get rid of this Photoshop screen. We'll bring it back a bit later. At the moment, what we want to focus on is Lightroom. So last thing, just quickly before we get started, I'm just going to make sure that people can see the screen, see my Lightroom screen, and can actually hear me. So a poll should have popped up. Just if you can't hear me, or if you can't see me, or you can't not see me because you can't see me, I'm not sharing the camera tonight because I've been sick for 2 weeks and I look like death, and my office is messy, so it's going to be screenshot only for the evening. Just respond to the poll if I see some can sees, can't hears, and some can hears, can't sees. We'll quickly troubleshoot that, but it should all be working now. The advantage of logging on a little bit earlier. Okay, I seem to think we're okay. Everyone seems to be responding yes, so let's just move forward. Okay, welcome to Post-Process Like a Pro. I'm going to get rid of that Photoshop screen for now. We'll come back to Photoshop a little bit later. I'm just going to get into it, and it's going to be hard in one respect, and that respect is that I have a tendency to, in teaching a workshop or when I'm teaching a live seminar or an event, I can generally gauge by everyone's faces or reactions or questions or what's going on, how I'm doing or how you're learning, or if I need to repeat something. So, excuse me, teaching to a screen is going to be a little bit different. It's actually going to feel very much like a one-sided conversation, and I hope that it all works. Just a couple of housekeeping things really quickly. Feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll glance at my second monitor from time to time to see if there are questions. A lot of questions I won't answer straight away, because we will probably answer those questions as we go with different exercises. At the end of the class, I'll make sure we take time to go through the questions that I haven't answered. Jude, if you see a gray screen, is it just a plain gray screen, or can you see basically a gray box on Photoshop? Sorry, on Lightroom. Let's go to one of the photos that someone's uploaded for us. Judith, can you see that photo of the sunset? Just waiting for Judith to respond really quickly. Just making sure we're all good. Dun, 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 dun. I should have actually set the Jeopardy. There we go. Judith's fine. I should have set the Jeopardy theme tune up for when I'm waiting for things. Okay, welcome to Lightroom. Lightroom is probably one of the coolest things that's ever been invented for photography. Now, although this is a developing and post-production webinar, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about workflow and organization. And the reason for that is, A, it's going to make your job so much easier later on if you're doing it all really awesomely. And secondly, I do know that there are some people joining us tonight that haven't used Lightroom before. Some of us are sitting there going, what? How do you not use Lightroom? But no, it is the case. So I want to make sure that we're all working, I guess, with the best habits and best practices as we can. I'm just going to go through the library screen really quickly so we can see we've got our navigator window here. We've got our images here in the center that are basically in the folder. We'll talk about folders shortly. And we have our our library options here on the right. Things I'm not going to go through today are published services. Published services, look, they're handy. They're kind of gimmicky. I don't use them. Uploading directly to Facebook. If I'm uploading to Facebook, I'm generally going to put a comment, so I don't really want to bulk upload through Facebook. Collections we'll get into a little bit. We've got our folders here on the left. I'm going to talk a bit about organization in a moment. Catalog, different settings, not really as important at the moment. And a navigator image, which actually is really cool. And when we're starting to do some editing, you'll make sure you see that. Margaret's just commented that she can't hear anything. Just give me one moment so I can just send a quick message to Margaret. Margaret, volume seems to be working for most people. Please ensure your volume is turned up. Maybe try headphones. Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right. What we're really going to focus on today is library and develop. Map, book, slideshow, print, web. They're not really that cool. They're not really that important. I rarely use them, maybe from time to time, but they're not that great. Everything that we really need to do, 99% of Lightroom, is going to come in library and develop. And you're all sitting there looking, and I know people are thinking, they're going, wow, those fonts are awesome. In your Lightroom preferences, you can actually set up your identity plate with different things like that. I don't usually. I just decided to do it for tonight's webinar just to make everyone sit there going, oh, wow, that looks good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about organization. You'll notice here that I've got my folder set up with the date, 2007 for July 27, and webinar. So my standard practice, sorry, just 1 second. People might be having issues. Safari might be having issues with volume. Try Firefox or Chrome, apparently. Okay. So organization is really important. So you'll notice here I've got my shoot date, and then I've got a title. So if we were looking at my main catalog, and we're not using my main catalog tonight because it's 200,000 photos, so moving between folders or moving between photos can, be a little bit slower than we want to work with tonight. So I've decided to create a brand new catalog. I usually just use the one catalog. A lot of people ask me, should I use a different catalog for portraits or a different catalog for each wedding? I like to have everything in one catalog. And the reason I like to have that is it's very easy to find photos. It's very easy to switch, and it's very easy to work if everything's together. But organization becomes important. So you'll notice that I've got my date, and I've got my shoot titles. So in another example, that might be 2017-07-29 Smith wedding. And then that folder is everything about the wedding. Now you'll notice that you don't see anything in that folder. No photos in selected folder, subfolders not shown. We can actually go up to library and we can turn on show photos in subfolders and we can see everything. But again, that's starting to get a bit busy, so I try not to do that. I like to work on a different organizational structure, which is I have my master files. So all the photos that we're seeing here are the photos that people have uploaded to the webinar folder a little bit earlier for us to work on tonight. I've created a second one with some of my photos just to teach some of the things that weren't included in your uploads. I have a second folder for Photoshop edits, and I have a third folder for exports. Yes, there is a folder here called Shameless Advertising, just because we're going to have a break and I'll quickly, show off some stuff. But you'll generally notice that I do that 1-, 2-, 3-. So I've got 3 subfolders in each thing: master files, Photoshop edits, and exports. And these make life easier. This makes life easier for me to be organized. When we do the exporting, I'll come back and talk a bit about this one. But for now, let's talk about our uploads. So the first thing I do is I upload everything into a folder, move them into a second folder called 1- master files uploads. The next thing I do with my organization is I go through and I work out what images I like. Now, one thing Lightroom's really got going for it is its rating system, its pick system, and its color system. If we drop up here to the top, let's have a look. Actually, we can do it down here at the bottom. We can turn filters on, flagged. We can rate it, unrated. We can do a lot of different things. So, for example, there's no photos matching that. Say, for example, I really like this photo here, number 25 in our catalog, Untitled-251, and I really like it. So I've got like 18 photos that look very similar. Actually, let's go to my folder because we've got a few photos here, 5 photos from the same shoot, and I'm trying to pick one. So I might go, well, okay, that's a short list, that's a short list, and that's a short list. So I've now got 3 by clicking P or clicking the white flag option here at the top of the image. I can click it there or I can turn it off. Then what I can do is come down here to the bottom right of the screen and I can filter just by those picked images, which means if I click that, I'm only looking at those, which means that if we're trying to work through our organization, if we're trying to just limit what we're seeing, using these flags makes life really easy. So then I've got 3 and I'm like, okay, I think I like, that one more than that one, more than that one. I can then go to filter and I can sort by rating, or I can look at images that are just rated, or I can, look at, let's just come up here to the view menu and look at sort by rating. There's another option. I'm just not, here we go, view options. Color label, just turning on some things that I had turned off just to make life a bit easier. So what I can do here is I can go, okay, I just want to see the ones that are 3-star. If you look down here at the bottom right, or 2-star or better, we can start going through and, picking what we like. Now, shortcuts 1 through 5 are going to give your stars a rating. P and P again are going to turn, P and I can't remember how to turn off the flag, actually is the shortcut. Let's just click on the flag. But they're going to, allow you to start picking things. And we can do a bit more than that. Say we pick these 3 images, we give these ones a rating of 3-star. If we want to go even more into it, we can use numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and we can start giving it a color rating. And so what we can do if we really wanted to is work out different ways of well, don't know what I just got into people mode. Let's get out of people mode. Wow, okay. Only 5 faces needed. Let's do that. Okay, we don't want to do that. Let's stop. Fortunately, we've only got a bunch of photos. It should let me stop that. Let's pause that. Stop. Wow, okay, sorry guys. I accidentally hit a shortcut I've never used before. Let's try and stop people mode. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to stop it. Sorry, guys. If my voiceover is echoing, I'm not sure why that is. And by the way, U is for unflagging, the opposite of P. Thank you, Bruno. All right. Let's just, sorry, guys, just give me a moment and we will have people mode stop. Unfortunately, I started something that we didn't want to do, and it's just going to take a moment. Whistle, whistle, whistle. Ah, there we go. People mode is there. Grid mode back to grid. G, sorry. G will go to, there we go. I've never used people mode. It's never something I've really been interested in. I don't like automating. Thank you, Andrew, for tipping that through. Guys, if you mute your chat, that will stop echoing. There we go. Okay, so G for grid mode. Here we go. Okay, so we've got our images. Everyone's images that you've uploaded. We'll be working through those shortly. So I have my master files. Once I've started working on something, the next thing I'll do is, if I'm taking it into Photoshop, I'll create a second folder under my directory where I keep my Photoshop edits. And that just means that I can keep everything a little bit easier. I'm not scrolling through, hundreds of images from a shoot catalog. And like I said, I'll get to exports very, very soon. I'm not going to worry too much about the right. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. The one thing I won't talk about is quick develop. Guys, if you have time to put things in Lightroom, you've got time to give it just a little bit of post-production rather than, just auto white balance settings or auto tone controls or just, up and down on, basic settings. The things that do work really well here in the library screen are your keywords. Now, just with a few of the images that you've uploaded today, I've gone through, and if we look here on the right under keyboard tags, you'll notice that I've actually given some of your images keywords. And the reason I've done that is to make life a bit easier. And the reason being is that if we're looking for images, and we'll come back very soon and talk about how to find those images, looking for a keyword, we can find images a lot easier. So when I'm importing images into my Lightroom, the first thing I do is obviously, load them all in. Actually, let's go through import. So let's pretend we're importing images. We're not doing it tonight because it might take a little bit of time and we don't really want to. We will pretend we're importing these images from this folder. The first thing I do is I copy as a DNG. Now, if we're uploading JPEGs, it's not going to work, or PNG. If we're working with RAW files, it will work. Now, what's really cool about DNG is it is a RAW file. It's the same as CR2 on Canon or NEF on a Nikon, but it's Adobe's version, and it's a smaller size. So we're getting the same information, we're getting all the same stuff, but we're getting it smaller. And, being Adobe, it actually works on more software. So more software will work with DNG than will work with CR2 or NEF. So copy as DNG or copying into my folder, which today is this one here, 2017-07-27 webinar with all of these. Now, if we've got a JPEG image, it won't load as a DNG. It'll load it as a JPEG. So step one, let's be shooting RAW. The next thing I do is apply during import. So what I have here is a preset called copyright metadata. Let's just go into edit presets so we can see what that contains. The two things I'm really worried about is my IPTC and my copyright and creators. Now, hasn't actually done that in this case. Cancel. Let's just cancel. Cancel. Don't save. Okay. Let's look at copyright metadata. And I'm just going to load specialoffer2.jpg just so we can see how it works. The second thing I'll do is with the entire image of a shoot, or all the images of a shoot, is I'll do some blanket keywords. So it might be a landscape shoot, in which case I'm going to put landscape. It might be at Byron Bay, which means I'm going to write Byron Bay. It might be ocean, so I'll put ocean. It might be sunset, so I'll put sunset. So anytime I'm looking for my sunset images or my ocean images or landscape images in general, I can search from, my keywords. I'm going to throw them into the Luke, that one into the Luke stuff now, just so it's there, but I'll delete it afterwards. It doesn't really matter. I just want to show you what happens once it's imported. Don't import suspected duplicates. Look up here on the top right. It's good to keep our catalog clean by keeping, just what we need. Build previews. So minimal and better than sidecar, standard 1:1. I always use standard as a default. It's a pretty good preview. It lets us work nicely in the navigator window. 1:1 is going to take longer to import, but it's going to preview faster when we zoom in on an image later on. It depends if you think you're going to be editing all your images or, just a select few from a shoot. I don't worry about making a second copy. Where you would use that is if you, on import, so you're importing it to the drive you work on, but you're automatically backing them up to another drive. That's where you would tick that. File renaming, I tend to just sort of keep them as they are. It just makes life a bit easier. Develop settings. You can, at this point, put in your presets. I don't like doing that. I like to work on images on an individual basis, so I ignore that. Into subfolder if you're organizing, and it depends how you organize. In this case, we're just going into there. We're going to import that single image. And if we go now to the Luke's stuff folder, there's that image here, special offer 2. Let's just double click on that. That's from a promotion we ran for the F8 stuff. And you'll notice here over on the right that those keyword tags are there. Byron Bay landscape, ocean sunsets, and so is my copyright metadata, which is copyright 2017 Luke Ballard, creator Luke Ballard. And if we go through all of that, we're going to see my all rights reserved. We're going to see a few different things that are part of my IPTC metadata. In fact, if we come up here to preferences and metadata, it's not in preferences. Where is it? Actually, it should be in preferences. Let's just have a look. General. It's all right. Regardless, the idea is that, and we can do it when we import actually through that window. If we go to import and apply during import metadata, edit presets, making sure that we're actually set. Here we go. There we go. Copyright metadata. You can see all my different bits and pieces, and I only use those ones, copyright and creator, which lets me make sure that those things are done. Okay, so that's importing. That's all I'm really going to talk about organization. I will come back to organization in future sessions if anyone has any questions. I'm just going to flag that as X lets you reject, so you can delete, and that makes life a bit easier as well. Okay, let's start talking about post-production. We're going to start talking about now the develop module. The develop module is pretty much why we're all here. I'm going to go through, before we go through my images, I'm going to start talking about some of yours. Okay, and this is where we're going to start learning about how we can do different things. Okay, so we've got some jewelry here. Now, some people are saying, sorry, just looking over at the questions really quickly, the writing on the screen. And Amika, the writing isn't that important. When you look at that window yourself, you'll actually be able to see that a bit easier. All that writing is just, my data or my metadata there. Donna, sorry that it's still cutting out. Guys, just make sure that no one else is using internet in your house if you're having trouble, if it's cutting in and out. I'm on Malcolm Turnbull's NBN, and it seems to be working tonight. And I've told my wife that she's not allowed to watch Netflix this evening to keep the internet connection pretty clear. So, and my speed test is showing pretty good uploads. So just double check that, your internet's good on your end. Obviously, this is all being recorded. So if you are having trouble, you will be able to see it again later on, or you'll be able to use it as later on. I'm talking as loud as I can, close to the microphone. Hopefully that is something we can fix. Okay, let's just talk. We're going to get into develop mode now. So here we have, and I don't know who uploaded each image, so I can't thank everyone individually. We've got a piece of jewelry. on a jewelry stand. Now, keep in mind that Lightroom, Photoshop, post-production is not a wizard. Which means that, we can't fix absolutely everything. Step one is make sure we're taking images the best way we can. And by that I mean is we've taken this, or whoever's taken this has shot it on an angle. We can see here along the left edge, we can see the end of the seamless paper, and we can see stuff going on. So really what we want to do is make sure that we are keeping everything seamless if we are shooting something like this for commercial purposes. But we can still make it better. So let's go into our develop toolbox, or pressing D for develop, or clicking on develop, either way. The way I process photos is I start here with my basic settings and I work all the way down. Now, looking at our right-hand column, we've got everything from basic down as what we call global settings. And then we have our local settings up here at the top in the form of our crop overlay, our spot removal, our red eye removal, which these days doesn't really count, graduated filter, radial filter, and our adjustment brush. So I tend to work, window by window. So the first thing I would generally do with something like commercial images is just take my contrast up a little bit. If my exposure is right, which it seems to be pretty good here. I'll take my shadows up because it's commercial. We want to be able to see as much as possible. But I will take my highlights up as well, just limiting my blacks and taking my whites up. So all of a sudden, we're starting to get a lot more visible image. For the purpose of this image, I'm going to click down here on the YY, which gives me a before and after. So what you're actually going to always see here on the right is what I'm affecting, compared to on the left, what we originally took, or what was originally taken. Because it is commercial imagery, I'm going to take the clarity up a little bit as well, which if we're looking left to right, what we're going to see, especially here, if we're looking at this, and we can zoom in. It's awesome. I love Lightroom. We can see that detail here on this purple amethyst and this one here. We can instantly see how much more awesome it is. One thing I usually do before this, by the way, is I click here. If we're looking at our histogram window, and I click here, both on the white and black. The reason I do that is it creates what's called a clipping mask. It lets me know how things are going, which means if I'm taking the exposure all the way to the left, the blacks are going to go blue, which is telling me I've taken it too dark. And likewise to the right, it's going to go red on the highlights. So clicking those, clipping masks is a really good way. So we've got blue. Let's just take that up a little bit, of just, trying to work out where we want to be. Still some blue there. If I go a little bit over to the right, we're getting some red there. So it's one of those things where we also want to use a, bit of eyeballing. Let's take our blacks up, and as we can see, our blues are gone, our reds are gone, and our clipping looks good. Once I've done that, I'm going to come back to tone curve. Now, tone curve, highlights, lights, darks, shadows affect exactly the same thing here as highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. It's just a second way of doing it and allowing us to actually further do some stuff. So we're going to just play with our lights a little bit. And the reason I'm doing that in this case is we've got these seamless background issues here. I'm going to just take my darks and shadows just up a little bit here, which is giving us just some nice shine on that. I'm going to just take my clarity up a little bit more. Now we've got vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is what I usually work on before I work on saturation. Both of them are going to affect how color is treated in your Lightroom. Difference is that, especially if we're shooting people or photographing people, vibrance isn't going to affect skin tone as much as saturation. Saturation will affect everything. Vibrance tries to keep skin tone out of it. Is probably the easiest way to explain it. So let's just take our vibrance up. Actually, let's do both. So here we are at 0. I'm going to take vibrance up to +10. Or 9 or 11. It's not letting me click on 10. I'll go back to 0. Just a moment. There we go, 10. We'll take that back to 0. I'm going to take our saturation up the same amount. So we can see that it's actually doing, and if we come over here to our history on the left, we can actually go back and forward. So we can see here, that was our vibrance. That was taking the vibrance out and putting the saturation up, and they're very similar. The saturation's got a little bit more just because it's affecting oranges a bit more than vibrance does. I generally try to do vibrance before I do shadow and, before saturation. And, sometimes I'll do both. In this case, we're going to take our vibrance up just a little bit just because of these purples. And we can see here if we're comparing left to right, just the color and the brightness, and especially these purples and this amber coming through is just a lot happier over here. Moving down, we have and I prefer using the HSL or the color option here. They're both the same thing. They do the same thing. It's just we can see it all in one. For example, if we're looking, and I prefer the HSL version because we can actually move color by color. So if I click here on the hue, for example, and I want to take my, well, here we've got this horrible background color, so let's play with that. So what I'm going to do is click on it, and by dragging my mouse up and down, I can affect what's in that color range. Just go back to 0 on that, and I can do the same thing with saturation. So I can play with those, and likewise I can do the same thing with luminance. So in some respects, using the HSL section is a lot easier than using the color or the black. Well, we'll talk about black and white later when we move something to black and white. Color, has everything together, but you can't click individually to work on stuff. HSL gives you just, the hue, saturation, luminance just gives you a little bit more control as we go, and just a few more options. Split toning. Split toning is a really awesome tool in Photoshop. Like if I'm going to be doing things like split toning, adding highlights and shadows, that's something typically I try to do in Photoshop just because it gives me a bit more control. But what it does is, for example, say I want to make my shadows here a bit whiter. My shadow's a bit whiter. And I'm going to add a little bit of, we'll say blue to the highlights. And this is actually going to work better in a portrait just for the sake of, what we're doing at the moment. It's just showing you that we can play with a few different things, but we'll just come over here to vibrance and go back to where we were. That's really something I would do more in Photoshop. Same as, removing something like this and putting it on a completely white background. What I'm actually going to do is, once I've gone through the rest of just these panels, is we're going to mark this to take into Photoshop a little bit later on so I can show you a few things. One of the things I always do is here in the detail, sharpening and noise reduction. If your image is noisy, then yeah, we want to play with it. This one obviously has some noise over here. I'm not stressed about that at the moment because there's no noise here on the actual subject. And like I said, I'm going to do something in Photoshop a bit later on. So I'm not really too fussed on that. We'll come back to noise reduction with some night photography a bit later on. In lens corrections, I always click on enable profile corrections. We can see it here that if we click it, the image is shifting slightly, and that's taking into account the lens. Lightroom is really good at knowing exactly what everyone's using. It knows your lens. All that information is in your metadata and your EXIF data, so Lightroom knows it and it compensates for it. So whoever shot this image took it on a Sony on a 24 to 240, and it takes it into account, and we can see that distortion's been corrected. I always click remove chromatic aberration, even if I can't see chromatic aberration. In a later image, I will show you what chromatic aberration actually is. It doesn't hurt by clicking it on. It's not actually going to affect anything negatively. It's just good to do it in case it's actually removing something we can't see. Post-crop vignetting. To the right is white, to the left is dark. I'm not really going to talk about that too much. If I'm going to vignette a photo, an image, I tend to do it manually, not using their really cool tool in the effects column. And I'll show you how we do that in a later image as well. Grain, we're not really going to add grain. Camera calibration, you don't need to worry about. Transform, again, you don't need to worry about it unless you want to manually change some of these things that your profile corrections are doing. If you want to play with it. At the end of the day, though, Photoshop is a lot better for some of those things. And, when we get to Photoshop, we'll talk a bit about that. So that's what the right columns do. Once we've done the global settings, we come back up to the local settings. We've got, as I said before, we've got our crop, we've got our spot, we've got our red eye, we've got our graduated, we've got our radial, and we've got our adjustment. This is a hard image to play with without Photoshop. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the tools, and we'll come back to it later on. I'm going to click on Spot here, which is the second one in. I'm going to take my size up a little bit. And what I'm going to do is just paint over some of these spots that we have happening here, especially this big one here on the right, on our backdrop. Now, we've got two options really in our spot here. We've got clone and heal. Clone is going to take something physically from one part of the image and move it to the other. Heal is actually going to just take the texture of somewhere else and try and incorporate it with the color of where it goes, which is really handy when we're doing something like this. If we click off there, we can see that, some of those spots are starting to vanish. I didn't really go over them too well. Let's keep going. Actually, the problem is there that I'm using heal because there's some color there that we want to get. Oh, that's better. Likewise here. And if we're comparing left to right at the moment, we can see that some of that's now gone. If we go over it, Spot Heal is really more used for more defined areas. We can see here, we've got a few more. With a lot of our bigger work, we really want to try and use Photoshop more than Lightroom. Lightroom is fantastic, and it's actually doing a really good job here, actually, which is awesome. It's taking out, just turn that filter off, and we can see it's done a pretty good job. Actually, I also think my screen's a bit dirty, so I'm just probably getting a bit confused. But that's what Spot Heal does. We'll talk about some of these other ones on the next photo. In fact, let's go to the next photo. Thank you for whoever uploaded that jewelry. I'm going to just jump around a little bit through some of these photos depending on what we're talking about. And really based on what we just talked about, I want to go to a model photo. Let's go to this 3 here. That's a good one. Okay, we're going to talk about this one really quickly so we can talk a bit more about these local things that we can do. Click D for develop or go into our develop toolbox. Again, we're just going to go through really quickly some of our global settings before we start dealing with our local ones. First thing I'm always going to do is just fix my contrast based on what I want. Obviously, contrast up and down, just so we can see what it does. In this case, I'm just going to take it up a little bit. I'm going to take my highlights up a little bit as well. See that red up in the top right? It's telling me it's going a bit too far, but if we take it down, what's it doing? Yeah, let's take it down. We're not going to go all the way down. We'll go to about there. We're just going to take our shadows up a little bit as well, because you'll generally find that for the most part, shadows are going to affect your subject in portraiture. Again, we'll see what the whites are doing. And a lot of things that you want to do are always going to be done by eye. There's no formula. And this is my problem with presets, is that, And presets are fantastic, and you can buy them for $8.99, and you can buy Jay Colson's presets for, $19, and, he goes and buys his wife a $150,000 car that she leaves trash in. I don't know if anyone knows that story. It's one of my favorite things in the photography world. Never mind. I'm going to just take my clarity up a little bit. Now, clarity is one of those things that, has benefits. All the way to the left is horrible, all the way to the right is horrible. But, micro movements with clarity can be fantastic. If you want to soften the skin, we go left. If you want a bit more detail, you go right. But keep in mind, it's also going to affect your background. In this case, I'm just going to take it down just a touch because I really do want her skin nice and soft. And again, vibrance. Actually, this is a really good example of how it worked with skin tones. Notice that her skin tones aren't changing as dramatically as when I'm doing the saturation. With saturation, it's very dramatic changes. With vibrancy, not as much, but everything else has changed. Someone's just asked for the side-by-side before and afters. We'll come to that very, very shortly. I'm just going to play with this one a little bit first. So in this case, I'm just going to take the saturation up a little bit. The vibrancy up a little bit. We've just taken the clarity down. Again, I'm just going to take my highlights and lights and my darks and shadows up a little bit in this case. Now we're to our HSL. This is where I like to have a bit more artistic creativity and, license and play with my images a little bit more. In the case that I might take my green saturations up a little bit. You'll notice here that, wow, that's cool. Look at the moss on the rocks. I'm being a bit careful because, there's a bit of green on her swimsuit. It's not overwhelming, so that's good. I'm just going to take it up to about there. So that green's coming out nicely. And I like to take my aquas up a little bit as well. Whoops, wrong one. I was on hue, aquas, and sometimes my blues. And the reason being is I'm going to start trying to bring in some of that sky a little bit. We don't want it to affect her too much, and we'll come back to that very shortly. I'm going to ignore split toning. I'm going to ignore detail in this case. We're going to definitely enable our profile correction, and look at that change. You can see it there, just jumping in and out. We'll remove that chromatic aberration. We don't use transform. We're not going to worry about effects and camera calibration, which brings us to our local tools. I like to work left to right. The first thing I'm going to do is there anything here that I want to crop? Now, that sky, that little gap there, is actually going to annoy me if we can't do a lot with it. I don't think we can. So in this case, I'm going to hold down Shift so I keep my same ratio. And I'm just going to come down a little bit below it. And we might as well get rid of this as well and just come up a little bit above it. So we've got the exact same ratio. We've just taken out some of that stuff we really don't need. The next thing I'm going to do is my spot healing. Now, where I use my spot healing here is, notice I've got my feathering up a little bit. I'm going to take my size. You can see there it is. I've got my size nice and big. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm just going to make some nice big movements over here on some of this sand and try and get rid of some of that. In fact, let's do it with clone. I think clone's going to work a bit better for us. Some of these, let's just move that. There we go. Look at that. I'm just going to come in here like that. Now, a lot of this stuff I prefer to do in Photoshop. It's a lot easier. You've got a bit more control. Photoshop has a lot more going for it in that. Notice we've got that shadow coming through. We'll try and fix that a little bit in a moment. But we've cleared up. Let's have a look at that YY now, just so we can see, we've definitely cleared up some of that and made that there. Now, the next area where I really want to use my spot healing, let's just have a look at how that's in focus. It's pretty good. Looks like whoever took this photo, I'm going to have a guess that you were on autofocus. the eye is just not quite as sharp as parts of the bikini here at the back. So I have a feeling that your autofocus has looked for everyone's autofocus has actually picked for, the brightest bit, and it's gone for the bikini. Someone's just asked if you should be able to see everyone's comments. No, it is set up so only I can read comments, and the reason for that is just so, it's easier for me to comment or scroll through messages as we need to. Okay, just coming back, we're back into that, spot healing one here in the local settings. I'm going to take the size right down here. And this is where let's come in even more. Whoops, wrong way. And what we're going to do now is just a bit of that skin retouching. Do that in here. So we're just going to come in here and just fix up some of these little bits and pieces that, especially if we're doing a fashion shoot or a model shoot, we really want to get that, flawlessness coming through. I'm talking about airbrushing. I'll talk a bit more about airbrushing when we look at Photoshop. For now, I'm just looking at, just the basics. Just little bits and pieces just to make sure that this mark here, and likewise we've got this. There we go. Okay. Just little bits and pieces. Oh, she's bleeding. Okay, let's fix that. There we go. Better than Savlon. All right. So we can see here all of these little nodes. Now, if you're wondering what those nodes are actually affecting, you can always just hover over it. We'll look at that a bit later on. If we click off that, it's hard to see exactly there on that zoomed out what's been affected, but when we look at it very shortly, we'll see the changes. Red eye removal. Honestly, not really going to affect us too much at this stage. If we click there, it's going to tell me there's no red eye. It's going to say there is no red eye. It's not doing anything. And the reason being is that there's no red eye. Things have actually gotten a lot better than they used to be, when flashes were built into the camera and all of that. And red eye was really a problem for the amateur photographer, not the professional or the enthusiast that, worked with decent equipment. Red eye was the flash bouncing from the camera into the eye and back into the pupil. And we don't really have a lot of that these days. Next, we've got our graduated filter. Our graduated filter is really cool. If you've done a landscape photography class with me, it's one of the coolest things I have and my favorite things I have in my camera bag. For the purposes of digital production, it's awesome. This one here means we can go here and say, okay, we want to just darken that. Now, remember before I said that I don't want a vignette. I want to actually do my vignettes manually. So what I can do is I can take my clarity down, I can take my sharpness down, take my exposure down, my highlights down. I can create this vignette using different tools. Why do I want to do that? It's actually going to be awesome. You'll notice with the graduated filter, like a graduated filter, it starts at the top, goes to the bottom, line in the middle, goes from dark to clear, and this is about the point. Now, you'll notice that I've put this halfway point on our model, which means it's affecting her as well. So what I'm going to do is click here on brush, and on brush I'm going to click on erase, and then I'm just going to paint over her so she's not affected by that filter that I've just put through. I need to change my brush size, my feathers all the way up. Let's just take that down a little bit. Take my sides just down a little bit. I'm just going to give her a bit of a paint, just like that. So she's not affected by the reducing sharpness or by my reducing clarity. Look at that. So she's still looking great. But that, you know, right is starting to become less obtrusive. Let's do another graduated filter just coming from the left. New. We're just going to bring it from the left, exactly the same, from the left bottom, just because it's quite bright here at the bottom. Take that up like that. Same thing, we're just going to take our exposure down slightly. Let's take that sharpness all the way down. We'll take that clarity down a little bit. Take those highlights down a little bit because it's quite bright there at the bottom. Can even remove the, raise the contrast there. That's what we're going to do. Yeah, let's just take it up a bit. And again, we're going to go to our brush and erase just to actually make sure that our model's not being affected. So every time we do a filter, we need to redo the brush if we're doing it with this technique. Everyone's sitting there going, oh, wow, you know, we should do all the filters and then do the brush. If you do that, you're only going to be doing the brush off the filter that you just did, off the active filter. So once again, we've got our model. I don't know her name. I feel bad just calling her the model without actually mentioning her by name. We've got her removed from the graduated masks. So let's click off that. Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's go back into that one and the brush erase. I'm just going to remove a bit more here at the hand. Okay, a bit more of the, whoops. All right, so that's a graduated filter. In some, her name is I thought Bruno just told me it was Amy. I'm sitting there going, I thought it was Amy, but I didn't want to say Amy in case I got it wrong. Like, I didn't want to be that person that was like, hey, that's Amy. But Amy's a local Brisbane model. If anyone's interested in booking her, she is amazing, as you can see. Thanks, Bruno. Like, I'm sitting there going, yeah, but I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to call her a name that I wasn't sure about. Okay, so we've got Amy highlighted here. The next thing I'm going to do is come into my radial filter. Radial filter is awesome. What it means is I can hover this over her. I'm going to invert the mask. You'll notice that if I play with exposure, it's going to do everything outside. What I want to do at this point is play with everything within the filter. So I'm going to invert the mask, take feathering up a little bit. Usually about 3/4 is going to be great. And I'm just going to add, just take the highlights up. Now with this, some of her skin tones here, just on the side of her face, definitely here on the legs, they're just looking a bit warm, a bit cool. So I'm just going to take the warmth up, just the color temperature up a little bit. It's a beet shoot. We want to see that sun. There we go. We'll just take that up a step. Just a little bit of contrast, not much. And just a tiny bit of contrast, but definitely sharpness. All of a sudden, you know, she's now definitely looking like she's in the sun. Might just do another one just here on her face. And we'll just take that up a bit more as well. There we go. Just also a little bit of exposure, not quite that much. Just enough that we're just a tiny bit. So we're just getting a little bit of that glow coming through. Nice, that's better. And then we come to our adjustment brush. Now, adjustment brushes are like the filters. It just means we can paint over something and use any of these tools that we're using with our filters to do exactly the same thing. Where I tend to use it the most is here on sharpness. You'll notice that sharpness by default on mine is set up at 91. Why? Because that's where we're going to get the best benefits. Now, at 4.1, it's a little bit too much. Let's just go 3.1. There we go. What I do with my sharpness brush at this point is now paint over the eyes of my subject. Even if you're not seeing it, trust me, it's there. Paint over both eyes. I generally like to do my lips as well. Just a few key features. Let's do her eyebrows as well, just because they're going to be a little bit prominent in the photo. Now, if you want to see what you're affecting at any time, like I said before, you can just hover over your node and it should go red. There we go. So that red is showing you what's being masked, and you can just go and fix anything you need to fix. Once it goes red, you can see what you're doing. Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, let's go back to fit. So now what we're looking at is just that extra sharpness on the eyes and facial features, which is something we're really looking for with a bit of facial photography. Now I'm noticing here that, I've still got a bit of shadow here. Let's use our adjustment brush for that. In this case, I'm just going to set my sharpness back to 0. In this case, I'm just going to paint it here. And in that paint, I'm just going to take my temperature up a little bit. Not quite that much. And my exposure up a little bit, just to fill in some of those shadows. Sorry, guys. Shadows that were popping through. If we're looking at this as a side-by-side, there we go. Now, I probably went a little bit too far on that one just because I was showing off some of the different tools. So I probably did over-process her a little bit, but honestly, I'm actually really liking that. She's got this golden tone to her, which is fantastic. She looks like she's in the sun. She looks like she's a bit lit. But at the same time, yeah, I think I did go a bit too far. So let's just go back to that, and I'm just going to take that exposure down and the highlights down just a little bit. There we go. That's better. Remember, over here, you can anytime use your history tools to see what was before and what was after. Okay, so, oh, yeah. Okay, if we click on these YY, we can actually scroll through different options. It's actually really handy, especially in this one. If we hold down space, we can move in and out. Let's just let it go to 1, 1. There we go. We can actually see okay, why is that not synced up? That's weird. Oh, because I cropped. Just trying to figure out what happened. Because I cropped, it's not lined up. It's going to work better. So we can actually see how those change as we go. Awesome. Okay. There's a few photos of Amy that people have uploaded. So we will come back and play with Amy a little bit again later on. In fact, actually, let's do a photo of Amy now. G for grid view takes us back while we're in library mode to all of our photos. It's going a bit slow. Just let me clear my memory a little bit just so I can make sure that it's not my end. This one here, this is what we're going to work on at the moment. Fit to screen. And again, just while I'm here, actually, just having a look, see this, there's a bit of softness here around the eyes, whereas here on the lace, it's crystal clear. So just be careful that, you know, if we're photographing people, always lock in on the eye. Miss the eye, miss the shot, as you know, we like to say. So we want to make sure that we are getting the eye right. It's going to make life a bit easier later on. This is a really good example of a few different things we can do, especially using our local options. So once again, D for develop. We've got our clipping set so we can see the whites are highlighting here. Step one we're going to do is just bring our exposure. Wow, we need to go a long way down to, you know, get those whites in. Let's just try doing it with highlights. That's a bit better. Okay, so we'll take our highlights down. We'll just take our contrast up a little bit. Likewise, we'll just take our shadows up again because that really affects our subject more than anything else. Whites, we're not going to play with too much at the moment because they're pretty bright, but we'll take our blacks just up a touch. Take our clarity down. Clarity can go both ways, like I said, but in this case, we're going to take it down a little bit, and our vibrancy up, mainly because we want to keep her skin tones fairly static, but we've got some bright color here on the bikini. We've got some really nice blues, both here in the sky and in the water. I'm going to play with those in just a moment. I'm not going to worry too much about my tone curve here. I think we've got a lot of that really where we want it. Those pinks are pretty bright, so I'm just going to take my magentas saturation. Got to be careful here. I'm just going to take those magentas just down just a touch, not all the way like that, just a little bit, mainly because I really don't want them to, you know, overshadow her. Amy's obviously a beautiful model. We want her to be the star of it. So I'm just going to take the tone down on that just a touch. But we've got these nice aquas. So let's click here on the water and we're just going to take that up a little bit. And we've got some, you know, blues on the skies that we can take up. We can do that manually. Now notice if we do that, it's also making her cooler as well. It's not a bad thing. We'll, you know, deal with her individually there as well. Now the sky is overexposing a little bit. So actually, before we do that, let's just do what we're meant to do, which is profile corrections and chromatic aberration, and come back up to the top. So the sky is, you know, it's there. We can see it. There's definitely information there. We want to try and bring that in a bit more, which we'll do in just a moment. First thing I want to do is let's go to our crop thing. Now, one of the tools we've got here on crop thing is our angle, which means we can actually follow by drawing a line along our horizon. And that's going to straighten the image for us and make it a bit easier. Guys, especially with landscape photography, if you've done a landscape class with me, you know how much I hate a crooked horizon. In fact, we looked at our Canon video before, and almost every apprentice in 2015 at the Arcanum used to call this angle tool Luke's ruler. That was what it was known as, because it is probably my biggest pedanticism in travel photography. Got that nice and straight. I'm not going to worry too much. Actually, we'll spot here just a little bit. There's just a mark there. Let's get rid of that freckle. Okay. So we've cleaned that up. I'm not going to worry about red eye. Obviously, she doesn't have it. I'm going to bring my graduated filter in. Now, graduated filters are meant to go top to bottom, or they were designed to go top to bottom. So we could make our sky a little bit bluer, or, you know, equally expose our sky to our ground with our travel photography. In this case, I'm just going to take my exposure down a little bit. I'm also going to take my temperature down a little bit just to bring out a few more of those blues. Just get that nice blue coming through. Now, using my brush and my erase tool, I can start taking that. There we go. It's working. I can start taking it off Amy and, you know, bringing her back into where we had those settings originally. Come on. A Little bit of aberration there at her hair, but that's okay. Deal with that after. I was on a forum chat a little bit earlier. Someone asked what the biggest secret of photography, or if you could go back to your, 15-year-old self and tell them, about your love of photography, what would you want to convey? And my biggest advice was that patience isn't a virtue. It's 95% of the job. There we go. Now we can actually see the difference by clicking there and clicking here. Just that graduated filter, and then fixing Amy. Now there's a little bit more. Let's go back in. I'm just going to take that brush back a little bit. I'm going to click on that node, brush, erase. We're going to take that size down a little bit. I'm just going to just there at her hair. Wow, I've made that worse. All right, I'll come back to that later. Get rid of that. Okay. All right, we'll fix that later on. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is our radial filter, because actually this will probably fix that, to be honest. We're going to bring that down here onto Amy. Let's just rotate. Whoops. Just rotate it a little bit. Bring it down. Make sure that our mask is inverted. Our feathering is up a little bit. And we're going to just take that temperature up a touch. Let's just take that out a little bit so we can actually get that a little bit of hair in. Well, should fix that. Take our exposure up just a little bit. Now notice we've got these shadows here under her chin. Hopefully the shadows, there we go. We'll fix that a little bit. And again, we can strengthen that with the adjustment brush a little bit later on. I'm not going to worry about clarity here so much, but I will take my blacks up just a touch. So that goes. Still got some of that hair there to fix. So we'll come back. Let's go to our adjustment brush. And what we're going to do here is just give a quick paint here. I'm not going to do too much. We're just going to take the shadows up. If we hover over, we can see where we've affected. Go red, go red. There we go. We're just going to take those shadows just up slightly. Just a little bit. Just to give a bit more definition. And we're going to do a new brush, and we're going to take our sharpness all the way up once again, and we're just going to do eyes and smile. A little bit of eyebrows. Okay. Notice we've got a bit of coolness down here at the bottom, so I'm going to do another graduated filter. Just coming from the bottom up. Not going to worry about exposure. I don't mind that little bit of vignetting there, but I'm just going to take the temperature up on that a little bit, just so it's reflecting here on Amy. So let's just take that up a touch, like so. It's not too bad. If I'm being pedantic, I'm using take my size up on my tool. We'll go to clone, and I'm just going to need more size. There we go. I'm just going to get rid of some of these. Footprints. They're just a bit distracting when we're looking at an overall image. Cool thing is you can take from anywhere, you can fix anything. You know, Lightroom's kind of like that guy in high school that, you know, wants to do anything to be your friend. You know, it really goes out of its way to try and be helpful. That looks a lot better. Okay, so let's look at the YY version for after left right. There we go. So we can actually see there now. Notice we've got that glow from the graduated filter. It looks a little bit awkward there. It looks like, you know, it's fake, which, well, let's be fair, we've done a bit of work to it. So let's go back to that graduated filter. Once again, we're going to use our brush and our erase tool. Take our size up so we can, well, not that much. So we've got a bit to work with, and we're just going to erase just some of this extra glow around the sand, like so. Great thing about all of the brushes, all of the masks, all of the tools in Lightroom is you can affect things later on. So you can go, okay, you know what? No, let's just feather that more, or let's feather that less. You can start playing with it a bit. Having said that, that's okay. I think that let's just free up some memory. Okay. Then brush erase, feather down, feather up. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So we still have a bit of a glow there, and if I'm going into Photoshop, I'm doing a little bit more with it just to highlight it. But we can see there that we're definitely getting some of that color, we're definitely getting some of that vibrancy. Still need to fix that hair a little bit. We'll go back in up to our initial mask. Let's just see where it was affected. There we go. And we can actually see there what's being affected. And let's use the brush on this one. Brush and erase. And let's just affect some of that. There we go. And likewise, we'll just take the size down a bit. And just fix that. Okay. Much better. Amy, ladies and gentlemen. All right, I'm just going to take a break from your images for just a moment. I'm going to jump over to some of mine. Wow, we picked some, didn't we? Okay, so let's just unpick things. Okay. One of the coolest things that Lightroom's got going for it, especially for travel photography, is how much easier it makes panoramas. So here are 5 really ordinary, not necessarily amazing photos from Nepal. But combined, they actually make a really nice panorama. Shift and click all the way through so you've got the images you want. Now with panoramas, it's really quite simple these days. You can stand in one place, click, 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 front, left to right, up and down. I'm just doing a quick left to right one here just to show you the tool. But you can actually go 6 images and have 3 across, 2 up, or 9 or 12. You can go as much as you want. Lightroom's actually really good, and it's only in the new version. If you don't see panorama here in this photo merge section, when you right click, jump up here to your creative cloud options and update your Adobe Lightroom. So what I'm just going to do is select those 5 images. I'm going to select panorama, and Lightroom is going to do a really good job of putting them all together and giving me a preview. There we go. We've got 3 options: spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. 99.9% of the time it's going to be spherical, but let's just look cylindrical. Shouldn't change it too much. Perspective's the one that's going to be way out. There you go. Spherical and cylindrical, not too far apart. But perspective is going to be a lot more. There we go. We don't want to use that. Let's go back to spherical. Next thing I'm going to do sorry, is select auto crop. And now we click merge, and we've got a 5-shot panorama, nice and simply. It's going to actually create it, bring it over, put it here in my library as well. And it's still coming. Funny games. Things go slow. Patience, virtues. There we go. And we now have a panorama. And if you're looking at that, I mean, it's pretty flawless. Every time I do this, I'm sitting there trying to figure out where the edges are. I can't. Lightroom does a really good job these days of panoramas, so don't be afraid to just click left to right and put an image together. Those 5 pretty boring images actually create something, fairly decent looking over the Pokhara Valley of Nepal. Excuse me. Okay. While we're here on mine, let's just talk about a few other things we can do in Lightroom. The lovely Cheyenne, who for a bridal shoot decided she wanted black nails. That's okay. We'll fix those very shortly. So once again, working left to right, sorry, not left to right, top to bottom through our global settings. I'm going to go pretty quick because we've played with people before. I just want to show off a few things here before we go back onto a few landscapes. Going to take my contrast up. Now, obviously, we've got a bit of highlight and white clipping here on the wedding dress. We'll try taking our highlights down only to fix that. There we go. For this one, I will keep the left to right side by side so you can see it. I'm just going to take my clarity actually down a little bit on this because it's bridal and we want. Take my vibrance up a little bit, and we're already seeing the changes. Like left to right, it's already showing some pretty stuff. We'll take our, didn't want to do that yet. Not going to worry about tone curve here too much. I'm not going to worry about even the colors here too much, playing with those too much. I might just take, let's go saturation, just here on the peach. It's actually changing a fair bit with the yellows. Let's zoom in a bit more, fill, just pick a color there. Hopefully that's going to, it's actually affecting his skin more than anything. It's not being our friend. It's all right. We won't worry about that at this point. Lens correction, profile correction, chromatic aberration. Now, if we're looking at those side by side, we're looking at these two photos side by side with that chromatic that profile correction. You can see that it is just a more pleasing aspect. This was shot on a 24 to 105, so and probably zoomed out actually. Where's the, I don't know, 60 mil. Yeah, shouldn't have had too much correction, but there you go. A fair bit of skin orange coming through, so I'm just going to take that down a little bit manually. There we go. All right, working from the top. spot healing. That wedding dress was way too big for her, like ridiculously big. So what we want to do, or what we had to do, is we had to put a butterfly clip just there to basically hold it up. That's not great, is it? It's all right. Let's not worry about it. We're going to actually use this one in Photoshop. Okay. We'll leave that there for now. What we do want to do is start fixing some of these nice things. Like we want, oh, wow, not much color there or information in the skies there. Let's see what temperature does. Pretty average. It's a pretty bright day. All right. This is where split toning and compositing a bit of a sky in will actually come in handy. Let's just do that for now, just for the sake of what I want to show you with some of this is cool. Let's go down to our aquas and therefore make them a bit more blue on the hue. Reason I'm doing this is I want to show off or show a tool pretty quick. So I'm just trying to get that. Actually, they don't affect graduated filter, do they? There we go. Let's go back to here. Let's take our highlights down. Shadows. Take that temperature down. There we go. Just to get some blue into it, just for the sake of the next exercise. I'm going to go to brush and erase, and we're going to just clear off Shay, our model. Let's see there now. Where's our brush? Brush doesn't seem to be working. Erase. Come on. Flow up a bit more. I had the flow turned down. Never mind. Ignore me. Don't ignore me, actually. But forgot I turned the flow down when we were working on Amy. Okay. So, okay, there's Shay. Let's add a radial filter for her here. Whoops. There we go. Just give it a bit of. There we go. I'll take that temperature up just a little bit. We don't need much actually on this one. Shadows up just a touch. Awesome. Okay, so we're seeing, just for the purposes of this, we're seeing a bit of a change. What I'm actually wanting to do with this one isn't so much show you about processing an individual image, is about mass processing. If we go back to our library and we go back to our single image view, we've got a photo here of Shay that we've just processed that looks, okay. We didn't spend a lot of time on it just because we want to move on. Whoops. And we've got a second one here. If we look side by side, and down here where we had YY before, we've now got XY. So we can compare two images. They're very, very similar. Slight change just in her pose or where she's looking. Because of that, I haven't worried about sharpening the eye. But what we can do is come down here to sync settings, which means if you've got 9, 10, 14, 18 images that are all very similar, whether they're landscapes or they're portraits, and you just want to quickly get one right and then feed those selections over to them all. By clicking select sync settings, you can check all, check none. For the most part, I check all, usually turn off the crops, spot removals, and the transforms because they're usually a little bit more individual. And then I synchronize. And what's going to happen is all the images that you've got selected are going to get synced with the same tools or the same settings or the same changes that you made in that first image. Now, you'll notice with this one, a lot of shadow there because the radial filter for that one is in the position of where we placed in that one, which was a little bit more to the right. So if we click on radial filter, what we can do with this one is just move it a little bit more over. Just to bring that in place with the other photo. So now we're able to start working with 2, 3, 5, 9, 15, 100, 150 images at once. Cool. Okay, let's go back to your files. Okay, let's talk a bit about landscapes for a bit. Like I said, it's 9 o'clock. This is going to go longer than 2 hours. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm just going to keep talking. It's just the way it is. Okay, so someone selected a Milky Way. Don't know who it was. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so this is a pretty noisy image. ISO 12,800. Generally, my settings for Milky Way are about 3,200 is my ISO, 2.8 with about 20 seconds. So I'm looking at your 12,800 f4, 20 seconds. I'm guessing that your lens was a 24 to 105. Yeah, 24 to 105 with the f4. So you couldn't get down to 3,200 compensated with the ISO. Fair enough. We can fix that a little bit, and that's one of the beauties of Lightroom. Let's go back to here. The way I usually work with my Milky Way, once again, starting from, I'm going to get rid of YY for this because I like to see Milky Ways up close and personal. Again, starting from the top, I'll usually take my exposure up a little bit just so I can get a bit more definition there in the cloud. Again, contrast, I'll take it just up a little bit just so we see some of that darkness in the cloud. And I'll take my highlights and shadows and whites and blacks all up a little bit. I'm going to take my clarity up, nice little chunk, and my vibrancy up just a bit, and saturation also just up a bit. Notice we're getting so much noise here in the foreground, which it's a side effect of that 12,800. I'm actually curious what camera it was. It's all right. We'll come back to that. Okay, so let's have a bit of a look here. If you've done an Astro Camp with me before, and I know some of you have, actually, one of the things I usually say is embrace the noise, because with astrophotography, if we're looking, let's have a look here on the sky, we'll go to 1.1. The noise does look a little bit like, stardust or stars. We can get away with a little bit in the sky. With the ground, not so much. Obviously, it's a bit pixelated there, but we'll come back and have a play with that as we go. I'm not going to worry about, again, my tone curves in this case. I'll come back to my colors a little bit as I play. I'm not going to worry about profile corrections here. And the reason for that is with landscapes, quite often it's going to take some stuff out. In this case, it's not too bad. It just flattens it a little bit. That's fine. But we are going to come into our detail menu, and we are going to take our noise reduction luminance up, probably about 50% actually. And we're going to see if that fixes here some of the ground. a little bit, and again, it's fixed some of the sky as well. I'm going to try and fix a bit more of that ground as we go. Okay, let's play. Going to skip spot removal. I'm going to skip red eye, and I'm going to go straight to my graduated filter, and I'm going to bring it a fair way down. Really don't mind about sharpness. We're going to take our exposure just a little bit down, contrast a little bit back up, our highlights and our shadows again we're going to take up. Now we're going to come back up here to our temperature, and what I'm going to do here is just take it a little bit to the left, making the image a bit cooler, which brings some of those blues in with the purples, but I'm going to take my tint a little bit to the right to the purples as well, just to bring some of those purples through. Now we're starting to get a little bit more of that awesome Milky Way cloudness. Okay, now we've got that Milky Way cloudness. We're going to turn off the graduated filter. We're going to add, actually, no, we won't turn it off. We're going to add a new one, and we're going to come up from the bottom to the top. This is where we're going to start trying to fix some of this bottom foreground a little bit. We're going to take our sharpness down and our clarity down, because, well, not all the way, just a little bit. But we're going to actually here try and fix our noise a little bit. We're also going to take our exposure down. We don't need to see a lot of it. I mean, the tree there, here in our foreground, is doing a really good job of giving us a bit of foreground there to enjoy with our Milky Way. And we're going to just dehaze it a little bit to the right, just a touch. And that's just going to give us a bit more definition. Oh, yeah, it's actually making it, we're really struggling here. Where's our, okay, so it is raw. Just struggling there. Just go, okay, let's have a look. All right, we've got our purples and our blues that we're going to play with a little bit. I'm going to take that purple saturation just up a little bit. Actually, that's something else we can do down here. It's going to make it a bit easier. We'll just go back to that second graduated filter, and we're going to just desaturate it a little bit. Just taking out some of that saturation, just a little bit of it. Our highlights is just going to help try and fix some of that noise a little bit, just a contrast as well. Yeah, just try and hide that as much as we can. That's a bit better. Okay, so noise reduce. We'll just take some of that contrast noise reduction up just a little bit as well. This is where we can have a bit of fun. I'm actually going to take this image over into Photoshop. We're going to spend a little bit of time now on Photoshop. Guys, I apologize if you just heard scratching. My puppy Kodak was trying to get into the room. Clearly he's a little bit upset that I've been neglecting him for the last couple of hours. Let's bring into Photoshop Amy's, I know it's Amy because she just commented, Amy's Milky Way photo. With Photoshop and Milky Way photos, you don't need to do much. If you've done a Milky Way photography class with me, you know I don't do a lot. Basically, I'll duplicate the image and I'll multiply it. Ooh, look at that cloud. With the multiplied layer, I'll take the opacity down a little bit. Notice here now we're getting rid of a lot of that foreground. It's making it nicely silhouetted, but we've got that really cool cloud coming through. We've got that definition before, after. Let's save that. Now you'll notice it's saving as a TIFF, and it's going to save into, let's go into Lightroom and into the library. It's going to save that next to this image, go to grid mode, as a TIFF. The cool thing about TIFFs, people don't realize, is that TIFFs actually save layers the same as PSD files. So people think it's just the Photoshop document PSD that holds layers, but TIFFs hold layers as well. TIFFs are a much more ongoing friendly standard than PSD, which means that if you're working with 16-bit TIFF, and you can work with 16-bit and TIFF, unlike 8-bit JPEGs, then TIFFs and layers and 16-bit are just going to be happiness for working with your images. If you're wanting to, do a fair bit of work with your images and play with your images, that's generally the way to be working on them or saving them out of Photoshop. As a rule, I work with DNG files and I'll work with TIFF files. Occasionally I'll work with PSD files, but just because I figured to save it as a TIFF. So we've now got side by side. Let's go to the original DNG file. Now this has got a few edits here that we've done, but we have the luxury of being able to hit reset or go over here on the left all the way back down here to our import. And I'm doing that so we can compare it side by side with both the combination of Lightroom and Photoshop. In our XY mode. Cool. That's how I play with Milky Way photos. If you want to see a bit more of how I play with Milky Way photos, on the Remember Forever website, in the blog section, there is a video of me processing a Milky Way photo at one of our astro camps. If anyone's interested in an astro camp, shameless plug time. Sydney is coming up in September. Melbourne is coming up in August. We are going to run another Perth one in September, but I won't be over there for that one. Michelle, our Perth photographer, will be running that one. Brisbane, we are going to try and get another one through this year, but we're waiting to see how it goes. But Melbourne in August, Sydney in September, and also Perth in September are coming up. So if you're interested in doing some Milky Way photography, we'd love to see you on a camp. Okay, let's go back to grid mode. Let's play with another landscape photo. This is a cool one. I'm just looking at basically the thumbnails and seeing what we can do. How would I play with this? Okay, so once again, working top to bottom. In this case, though, I'm going to start with my locals rather than my global settings, and that's just because I want to fix this horizon. I think we all knew that was coming. I've already talked about how horizons drive me nuts. If anyone's ever wondering, yes, that's how you annoy me. Okay, working through contrast. I'm not going to worry too much about my exposure at this point. It's a little bit noisy if I take it up a bit too high, but we will take our shadows up and just bring that foreground in, and just our highlights down just to get some of that coming through, and a bit of clarity and a bit of vibrance and a tiny bit of saturation, which is bringing through that nice sunset. Okay, once again, I'm just going to take my lights a little bit down and my highlights a little bit down and my darks. Try to keep my darks where they are and just take my shadows up a bit. I'll take my green saturations just a little bit down, but also the hues just a little bit darker as well, just because I want to really focus on that color of the sky. We're going to do what we're meant to do. There we are, Sigma 10 to 20. It's interesting, that just lightened the image playing with the profile correction. It's not meant to do that. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it. There we go. Okay, so we've got a starting point. Let's bring our graduated filter down. There we go. What I'm going to do is bring that to about here and take my exposure just to bring out those really cool clouds. And again, I'm just going to try and add a bit of color to those clouds using my temperature and tint. Like, Independence Day, or we can go, Thor. But I think somewhere sort of in between is where we want to be. Take the contrast up because those clouds are pretty awesome. Same with the clarity. Usually I don't do too much clarity in the sky, but when you've got clouds like that, you really want to make it, look wrath of God. Don't talk about that. So let's take the shadows up a little bit, but shadows and blacks I'm going to do a bit opposite in here, just to really get some of that angriness coming through. Whites just to highlight a little bit. Same with the highlights. I'll bring those up on my graduated filter. Likewise, I'm going to do another graduated filter. Let's click new and come top to bottom, just like that, just to take some of that, make that ground look a little bit, darker. But I'm going to take my clarity up. I really want that. You can see there what we're doing with the blades of grass, and likewise with contrast, just a little bit of contrast and shadows. Nice. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Image by itself is a little bit noisy. Not sure why. Shouldn't be. ISO 400, 10 mil. We'll just take that out. Okay. Now notice these blue flashes here. That's like I said, that's your darks clipping. So there's obviously some shadows there that if we took our exposure up, that will fix. Don't necessarily want to do that. Notice we're getting that highlight in the sky when we do that. What we want to do is fix those with our adjustment brush. So we're going to create an adjustment brush, which is higher shadow, slightly higher highlights, and a little bit of exposure. We're just going to paint just there on those little blue bits, just to stop them clipping. Fortunately, it's not enough that it's going to impact our image. By doing so, there we go. Actually, that one did. Let's just ignore that one. That one's unfortunately just on a bright bit, so we don't want to play with it too much. Don't even really need to do these, to be honest. They're what's called acceptable shadows. It's not really important. Like I said, they are acceptable shadows. We'd be pretty well forgiven for just letting those pass. A little bit blue there, which I'm not going to worry about. How does that look side by side? They were very, very, very small changes. That was a very basic post-process, and you can see a very dramatic difference in how that comes up. Even, the depth of that orange coming through the sunset. In fact, we could even go further with that. We've got our fantastic HSL sliders here, so we can play with those a little bit more. Taking those reds and oranges up a little bit to give it a bit more warmth coming from the background. Cool. Just noticed a question from Gail saying, do you ever play around with white balance? I'm assuming that came from the astrophotography question, just looking at the time on the message. Yeah, and I did, actually. I took it down a little bit just to give a bit more blue before I started adding the purple. What I'll do actually really quickly is jump over to one of my photos. I'll go to one of my astrophotography camp photos. There we go. Look stuff. And I'll just process one of mine just really quickly, just again, so we can see that astrophotography side of it. Once again, D for develop, or click on develop. I'll keep this one side by side, just so we can see how it goes. Okay, starting from the top, working down. First thing I'm going to do is fix my horizon, because even when it's my photos, I'm pretty upset when it's wrong. There we go. Done. Okay, so horizon is now straight. Whoops. I'm going to take my exposure up just a little bit here, just so we can get a bit more of that cloud, but I'm also going to take that contrast up just a little bit, my highlights up, my shadows up. In this case, I'm also going to take my whites and my blacks up, just to give it a lot more definition there. Now, obviously, my rocks at the front are suffering, but don't worry, we'll come back to that. A little bit of clarity. In fact, I'm going to go a little bit higher on clarity here, in this case, and vibrance as well. Now I'm going to change my white balance and just take it a little bit more to the blue side, but adding a little bit of a purple. Whoops, not quite so much on either. So cooling the white balance and adding a bit of purple. A bit more. There we go, coming through. Just so we can get some of that color coming through in the cloud. Now we're going to skip tone balance. In this case, we'll bring our purples. We can play with our hues a little bit. Let's just go a little bit. Same with our saturation. Definitely want to take my blue saturation. Oops, that's hues. Blue saturation up a little bit as well. Notice how we're now getting that cross between the purple and the blue in the sky. Just take my noise reduction because it's the Milky Way. Look here on the lake, it is a bit noisy. So I'm going to just take it up just a little bit just to compensate, but we'll play with that a little bit again later on. And profile corrections, chromatic correction. I'm not going to worry about profile corrections in this case because once again, it's brightening like before. Okay, graduated filter, starting from the top, coming down. This one's already set. I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. There we go. Just all right. Let's take the highlights up, contrast up a little bit, clarity up a lot, as well as sharpness, and just a little bit of saturation. Let's take that purple tint a little bit more as well. And let's add a new graduated filter. We're going to do one coming from the bottom right up. I'm not going to go too far, we're just going to there. And on that, we're going to take our exposure a long way down. We're going to take our highlights all the way down. We're going to take our shadows. I'm not even worrying that that's clipping at the moment. That's how much I want to take those down. Let's just turn off that clipping mask for a sec. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I'm not even unhappy about it. Okay. I'm also going to just do a nice little radial filter here. Keep everything there at 0 just for the sake of starting fresh. I'm going to take the contrast up a little bit more. We're going to take that clarity just up a little bit more. Saturation just a little bit more. Sharpness a little bit more. Just not much, just a little bit here and there. We're talking micro movements just to give us something a little bit more. Let's take that into Photoshop. Oops. Just so we can, once again, just do a little finishing touch. Just duplicating the layer and multiplying it. It's amazing how such a small movement actually does such a big thing. Looks like we've lost 7 people. By 7 people. Hopefully I wasn't boring, actually. All right, let's have a look. Sorry. Someone said I'm not boring. Thank you. Just wondering why I lost 7 people. It's upsetting me. Okay, duplicating the layer once again. I'm going to multiply it, and I'm going to take that opacity down just so it's on top. Now, one of the reasons why I like doing so much in Photoshop is because of layer masks. Layer mask means that I can create a background color, I can create a layer mask, I can go to my brush, black, go to 50 opacity or 40 opacity, 40 flow, and I can just, wow, that's really hard brush. Let's start again. There we go. Make it a bit bigger as well. And I could just make some of that just a bit more punchy without going overboard. It's just, layer masks are fantastic. Really helps with our astrophotography coming through. I just coming through. So let's again compare how that looks side by side with our one. Let's reset the original. So this is the one we did with Lightroom. Reset that back to the start, and then we'll go to 1, 2, X, Y, so we can see just how those changes come in. So we really want to, highlight the benefits of the photo, the good things in a photo, and we really want to play with it a little bit more. Okay, let's jump out of that and go into something else. Uploads. What have we got? What have you all delivered? Let's look for something a bit different, something we haven't done before. Yeah, ooh, I like that. I like that. Hats off to who took that. That's really nice. Let's do a bit of work on this. D for develop, or click on your develop tool. We're going to start at the top, work down. I'm just going to take my exposure up a little bit on this one. Even though it's clipping there, that's okay. We'll come back. But we've just got, at original, this is just very, very, very full on dark. So we just want just a touch, take it up, and same with shadows. Take our blacks up a little bit as well. Take our highlights down to fix that clipping though. Just a little bit. We don't want to go too much with this. Where we're going to play with a lot is clarity. And the cool thing about waterfalls, especially when they're misty, is just having a bit of fun with that clarity and vibrance. Not going to worry about saturation. As you can see, even a little bit of saturation, even a little bit of saturation is a lot in this image. So we'll keep that quite happily down at 0. There we go. Tone curves though, I'm going to play with. I'm going to bring the highlights down a bit more in the tone curves and the light. We'll keep the lights where they are, and the darks up just a touch. But the greens are where we're going to have fun. So let's come down to our hue of our greens. One of the things I really don't like with a lot of the waterfall and forest settings I come up with is just that really light sun-kissed green. When you've got a waterfall, you want it to be dark and vibrant and happiness. So this is where the hue comes in a little bit, and we can just give it a bit more of that cooler wet green like so. And in this case, I'm actually going to do that with my yellows a little bit as well, because my yellows are turning into a very light green. Likewise with luminance, I'm just going to take the luminance down just a touch in this case, just to give it a fresh feeling. Now I'm going to come back up to my temperature. Because I've done that, it's actually made the image a bit cooler. So I'm just going to touch just a little bit like so, just to, and what we've really done is created that vibrancy and that saturation just by playing with other settings with my hue, saturation, luminance on colors. So I've actually created that without, a single slider that's trying to pick and choose what it wants it to be. Okay. There's no noise here. I'm not going to worry about that. Profile corrections, chromatic aberration. Yeah, that's nice. That didn't do anything bad. And in this case, this is one where I might use a vignette rather than, you know, coming through in 4 directions. It's a nice image. In fact, let's just crop it a little bit. You know, probably step 1 here is I'd come in a lot more on the waterfall. You can go all sorts of ways. Let's get it like that, and let's keep the same aspect ratio because we want to, and come in like so. Let's just focus on that. You know, I like to say, and some people have heard me say this before, if you've done a class with me, that photography is a subtractive art form. You know, most art forms are additive. You know, you start off with a blank canvas, you add color, and you add crayons, and you add paint, and you add this, and you add that, and eventually you have a work of art. But with photography, it's subtractive. We start off with this giant scene. We've got garbage bins and public toilets, and all of these things that we need to remove. So a lot of that comes down to our angle, and a lot of that comes down to a lot of other things. And, you know, cropping is one of those ways. Now that we've cropped, let's come into our post-crop vignette. Excuse me. Which is in our effects menu. We're just going to take that a little bit over. Not much, you know, if it goes like this, it looks terrible. We don't want to go like that. We just want to take a little bit so we're highlighting our subject, and by feathering it up higher, you know, it's not looking as obvious. Let's jump into our grid view. Actually, let's not go into grid view. Let's go into develop and click on YY just so we can compare the 2 side by side. Obviously, the before photo is showing post crop as well. That's just a downside of that, but maybe. Let's create a virtual copy. Let's go back to this one in develop mode. Let's reset it. And let's look at 2 of those side by side. There we go. So yeah, once again, very small movement, very dramatic change. Okay. One of the questions I got earlier was how I do something with my photos, which is basically photorealism or hyperrealism, and basically the gritty, really cool texture. I'm going to... My answer to that when I was asked the question was that sometimes those edits take me a couple of hours. So I'm going to just do a really quick version of that now so we can all see it. I tend to work with 2 programs to make it work, or 3 including Lightroom. First thing I'm going to do in Lightroom is just once again my basic edit. With these, I tend to take the contrast up a little bit, my exposure up a little bit, highlights. I'm generally moving to make these edits a little bit to the right, pretty much with everything, including clarity. Just, you know, keeping it up. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is a bit of a crop. With this, it was hard. You can see here I've got my speed light down the bottom. I've got, you know, lots of stuff. Let's just change our angle first, again, based on the bar, because it's going to drive me nuts. Got a bit of advantage here that I've done this before. And that's taken care of a lot of that cropping for us, but let's just bring that in a little bit. Like so. Okay. So we've got our image. In fact, let's... Can't even remember how I cropped it originally. Let's just take out some of their feet. There we go. Okay. Happy with that. All right. So minus their feet. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do with this one is open it in Photoshop. So The other two programs I work with, other than Lightroom, are obviously Photoshop, where I've been doing a few things. And the second one is Nik Effects. Now, the cool thing about Nik Effects is that we can, you'll notice here if we go to edit in, we've got color effects and the other Nik Effects filter programs sitting here available as Lightroom add-ons, but I like to use them from Photoshop. So I'm just going to drink a water, guys. If you said that's not water, that's bourbon. How well you know me, but no, it really is water this time. The reason I like to do it from Photoshop is, again, layer masks. So what I'll do at this point is come to Filter, Nik Collection, Color Effects, same as available for me in Lightroom. Difference is once I've done my Nik Effects stuff or my Color Effects stuff in Nik Effects and taken it over, I can then amend it with layer masks and opacity. I can't do that in Lightroom. In Lightroom, what I do is what I do. So here I've got Nik Effects. Let's just clear out all the recipes. So there's my original photo. To make something like this, I'm going to start off with exactly what that one was, which is a dynamic skin softener. Going to highlight it on her legs, and once again, I'm also going to do it on her chest. So all of a sudden, we're starting to see just that softness coming through. A little bit too soft, but don't worry, we'll come to that soon. Now, Nik Effects have a really cool feature, which is called control points, which means we can highlight or we can things. And you know what? Like, they're really, really handy. I'm not going into too much of that now because we'll be here literally all night. But stay tuned. I'm going to tell you a bit about Nik Effects very, very, very shortly. Not doing this properly because it would take forever, but we'll come back to it. Glamour Glow would, whoops, shouldn't have done that. Add filter, always add a filter rather than just doing it, or you'll undo what you did. I'm going to add a Glamour Glow. Again, not worrying so much about my control points, but just little bits and pieces just to create some of that cool hyperrealism effect. I'm now going to go to my detail extractor tool with a fine radius. Now you'll notice that I'm not changing a lot of our sliders here on the right. The reason why I don't need to is because they're actually where I last left them. Alex just asked the question, hasn't Google ended support on the Nik collection? Don't think it'll be around forever. That is true. They're not going to be continued. They're not going to be updated. But if you download them now, Google Nik Effects, you'll have them and they'll still work with your Photoshop and your Lightroom for eons to come. Okay, the next step I'm going to add is a bleach bypass. Bleach bypass is where we're really getting a lot of that effect. Now notice we're getting a lot of that grittiness coming straight through on the leg there. Too much, but we can start seeing where I got it all from. So we're going to take that contrast and that local contrast a little bit over to the left here. And now we're starting to get that hyper realism coming through. Cool, huh? Let's take our saturation just up a touch because we want some of that. Now, that's not bad. It's a pretty good move if we're comparing exactly what's there now to what's about to load. But wait, there's more. Loading, loading, loading. Saving, saving, saving. Like I said, patience is a virtue. It's 95% of the job. It's time. Here we go. But wait, it's going to take longer in a few moments. Okay, so we can see the difference there. So starting point now with that. So we're starting to get that, especially look here on Adam. Adam was the gentleman on the right. If we're looking at Adam here, it's at 200%, let's go to 100%, it's fine. And you can see there just that, how that hyperrealism is starting to play. I promised you more, let's do more. We're gonna go back to our background layer and we're going to, once again, go to filters. We're gonna add a different filter this time. Instead of the color effects, we're gonna go to our silver effects, which is a black and white version of color effects. So it's gonna start playing with black and white. Okay, with this one, there's a couple of classic ones that they use. I like to use one of the high definition ones. Full dynamic smooth is a really good option. I'm going to save that. Now, if you really want to play with color effects and analog effects and silver effects, you can play forever, really, let's be fair. I actually constantly joke that even the people that created Photoshop don't know everything that Photoshop can do. There's so many things, you know, that you can do with all of these tools that, you know, doing it in 2 hours or even 4 hours or 6 hours, you know, you need a bit more, which actually brings me to something I've been thinking about. And in fact, not just thinking about, it's actually something we're quite happy to consider launching, just while not sure where that silver effects has gone. It's still loading. Okay. It's coming. While that's loading, let's just talk about a couple of other things, because it's taking a few moments, and then I'll show you how that all merges together. If anyone is interested, and hopefully you are, because I think it's going to be very, very, very cool, and you've learnt something from the 2 hours and 13 minutes that we've had so far today, and you'd like to go further with your post-processing and editing, we're about to offer, starting next Thursday, so it launches on Thursday. This is week 0. Next Thursday is week 1, is a 6-week editing class. So it's going to cover a fair bit over 6 weeks. Each week is a 2.5-hour Thursday from 7:30 till 10 p.m. Over the 6 weeks. Week 1 is advanced workflow, organization, and also exporting. We're going to spend a fair bit of time in exporting, because, you know, how we send things to print and how we send things to the web is quite important as well. With a bit of developing in week 1 as well. Week 2 is developing in Lightroom. Week 3 is Nik Effects. Week 4 and 5 are Photoshop, and week 6 is Introduction to Compositing. So 6 weeks, 2.5 hours a week, that's 15 hours of editing. We are going to be doing a newsletter out tomorrow where it's $109, but we're offering 25% off to anyone that did this class with us. And you can take advantage of that by clicking the link. It is not going out at 25% off in the newsletter, so it is going to be $109 in the newsletter. You guys can get it for, you know, $1 or so, over $80 if you wanted to do that with us as we go. Now, coming back to Photoshop, what's going on? Why hasn't Silver Effects loaded? Let's have a look. It's 6 weeks. Just while I'm fixing this, I'll just size and play with over the course of the week. Submitted by Tuesday, and Wednesday get an email from me with information on, or feedback on how well they did or what they need to improve or areas they can based on the image. Everyone's going to be working off the same image. I'll be supplying everything that everyone works on, and it's going to be a bit of fun, and hopefully we all learn from it. So if anyone is interested, it's going to be it's going to be pretty full on. Question is it going to be a lot more interaction? That's going to come in the course of the week. So we're only going to be working, like here we've tried to get through as much as possible over the course of 2.5 hours. So, I haven't been able to spend a lot of time on individual images. Generally, each week we're going to be working on 2 to 3 to 4 things only. We're going to have a lot more time for questions. It's going to be obviously a smaller group over the 6-week course. But what will happen is you'll complete your homework. You'll email me based on the homework. You'll email me your homework, and I will come back with you saying, hey, this is where it's at. If there's anything I think we need to talk about, then it might even involve a phone call from me where we're talking about it. So who knows how that goes. Meanwhile, my Photoshop seems to be really unhappy. So I'm just going to try and figure out why. I've got like all of this memory going up. I don't know. Shouldn't be angry at me. But Photoshop seems to be angry at me. Okay, while that's trying to load, let's go back into Lightroom, and we'll just do something else for a few moments. Hopefully, I'll just move, actually, advantage of 2 monitors. I'm just going to move my Photoshop over to monitor 2, sitting on my left, so I can see when it starts to be happy. And we'll go to Lightroom. Now, Lightroom's not looking happy. I'm just getting that. Here we go. Okay. Really quickly, what we'll talk about, because it's getting on to 9:45, and I don't want to bore everyone because I feel like, it's inevitable, is let's talk a little briefly. We'll talk really briefly about exporting. So we've taken this, someone took, I didn't, I just processed it. This really nice photo of Amy, thank you, Bruno. And now we want to do something with it. So how do I export my photos, and how does that apply to my finish? Now we'll notice here that I've got, I've got this exports folder that's doing nothing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to right click on our image, and we're going to go to export. It's finished, it's done, but it's still sitting here as a DNG file. What we're going to do is not put in a subfolder. We're going to actually do a choose folder later. We're not going to change the name, but we are going to make it a JPEG. While we're in JPEG, we're going to keep it as sRGB for now. If you're sending it to print, so for the most part, I say keep everything at sRGB. If you're sending it to print, ProPhoto RGB is better. We're going to keep our quality at 100. We're going to, not limit out. We're not going to resize to fit at this point. What we want is a finished export worthy image from. We know that's done. We know that's finished. We want to keep our finished photos different from all the different photos of a shoot. It's not unlike. It's not. What's the word? It's not uncommon to do a shoot, or for me to do a shoot and come out with, 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 photos, especially depending on the shoot. So, when I've got 3,000 photos sitting in a Lightroom folder, separating becomes a lot more important. This is our folder that we're working on. So you can see here that your Finder or your Windows will match up with everything going on here as well. What I'm going to do is put this in the exports folder. Now, sometimes it's automatically going to sync. Sometimes it's automatically going to, it's not going to automatically sync, which means you need to click on this and you need to go to synchronize folder. It's going to add that photo to it. And now I've got a finished photo sitting here in my exports. So I know that I've got a file that doesn't need any more. Oops, sorry. Go back to Amy. So I've got one here that I can keep working on in RAW, but I've got a JPEG here that I can just quickly export anytime I want. You know, if I know I want that image, it's got the same tags. Generally, it's got all the same metadata. It's got everything there as I need it. Now that's a full-size JPEG. If I'm exporting to, like if I want to export to, say, Facebook, this is where I start making presets. I haven't put any on here. Let's do one now. We're going to make a preset called Facebook. Now, Facebook's really, really a good one to use as an example because the long size or the long edge, we want to have no more than 1200 pixels. Definitely want them large. We shouldn't. JPEG, sRGB, 100 quality. So we're resizing like that. In this case, I'm going to put a watermark. In this case, I'll put my black watermark through, even though it's not my photo, I will delete it. Obviously, I'm not going to watermark this photo as mine, but just for the example, choose folder later, export. So I'm just going to make a quick new folder, which is what I always do. Ready to upload, and the image will just go in there, and it's ready to go. So if we now go to my desktop, we go to that ready to upload folder. There's that image ready for Facebook, 1200 by whatever, and you know the watermarks there ready to go as well. So having all of those things preset makes life nice and simple. Delete that just because it's not mine. I don't take credit for other people's stuff. Let's see if Photoshop's come back while we're chatting. No, it hasn't. Photoshop doesn't seem happy with me. Okay. We saw where that was going as well, which is really, really hard. You know what I'm going to do is we're going to have to wrap this up because Photoshop's not going to work and I don't think I'm going to be able to get it working. I will make a quick 2-minute video at some point in the next week of basically the final steps after Silver Effects, how I merge those 3 layers, you know, the Lightroom layer, the color effects layer, and the Silver Effects layer for you guys to see how that finishes off. In one of our Photoshop modules, which is I think week 5. On week 5, actually I'll be giving you one of those images from the shoot, and that is actually going to be part of our homework on that particular day. Guys, if you're interested in doing the 6-week course with me, hopefully it's going to be a lot of fun. Click the link. I think the link should be there for everyone. Can we see the link? Can everyone see the link? Just out of curiosity, did it come up? Can someone say yes or no? Did the link come up? The link is not working. Okay. Right. Okay, give me a second. I will find the link now. It's just been a techno fun night, hasn't it? It's always the way. There's an old expression, to err is human, but to really screw things up, use a computer. All right, give me 2 seconds. I'll have that link. I'm just logging into where. Here it comes. Here we go. Okay. Here is, yep, is under the, where the offer came up, did it come up with a sign up button? If it didn't come up with a sign up button, you can just click on that PayPal link I sent through then, and you're able to go in and sign up at the 25% off price. That's all automatic. That button will be disabled tomorrow. That's Friday at 5 p.m. Just giving everyone who left before I offered it, or you know, was saving the video to watch later, a chance to get the offer. But that offer will not be repeated anywhere. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So you know, hopefully you guys will come and join me for 6 weeks. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time. Last bit of business is someone has won an F8 camera bag. Woo! What's an F8 camera bag? Some of you might not know about it. For those of you that don't know about it, I hate shameless advertising. There's our offer. I developed and designed my own camera bag a few months ago because I was sick of other camera bags. It's a messenger bag, it's a sling bag, it's all sorts of things. And I did say we were going to give one away to someone here in this webinar. So, drum roll. Actually, give me a second. I wrote everyone's names down and put them in a hat. I left the hat just over here. Give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Okay, someone else pretend there's a drum roll. And the winner is James Nolan from Sydney. James, congratulations. You have won an F8 Wanderer camera bag. Seeing as I'm talking about the camera bag, it's there. If anyone's interested, f8stuff.com is the other thing that I'm working on at the moment, as well as Remember Forever. We also have our clip, which goes to the side of your belt and carries your camera, as well as our really cool strap and our camera cleaning cloth t-shirts, as well as some other really cool products. Guys, thanks for joining me for 2 hours and 25 minutes, or 2 hours and 37 minutes if you came in a bit early and watched a video about me. I've had a lot of fun spending time with you guys tonight. I'm looking forward to the next 6 weeks. So, guys, thank you very much. And, any questions, feel free to email me. I think I've managed to get through most of the questions I've seen. If I haven't, I will look through the questions afterwards. And wait, there's one: how to remove green reflection from skin face. You have one such pick in the catalog. Let me go back to the catalog. Looking at the time of that, I think that was from that photo there, and that's what you're talking about. Okay, so the way I would fix that really quickly is that was from my radial filter. That was because of the copy over, syncing the settings. So let's just move that filter a little bit. And also the erase brush is probably how we're going to get rid of it there as well. Actually, that seems to be not that one. It seems to be from the graduated. There we go. So let's click on that, brush, erase, and that's going to remove that green reflection. There we go. So hopefully that answers that question. Guys, thank you very much. I really had a good time tonight. And yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email. Other than that, have a good night. Keep taking photos, keep editing them, and hopefully I'll see you all for the next 6 weeks, because it's, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I don't do a lot of those 6-week things, but editing and post-production is something that, we need to spend a fair bit more time on. All right, guys, thanks so much.